The importance of superstar status is beginning to lose value in Hollywood. In the past, people went to the theaters because of the face on the poster, but now it's more important to have hype on the internet, good advertising and having a script, based on some comic book. Of course, these days there are exceptions like Ryan Reynolds or Dwayne Johnson. But in the 80s and 90s it was different. Actors were divided into stars, superstars and a separate category that was inaccessible to ordinary mortals. Actors in this category can be counted on one hand. They are notable for the fact that each film with their participation renewed all possible financial records, and their royalties flew to unbelievable height. Today I would like to recall Sylvester Stallone's career, who first climbed at Hollywood Olympus, was there for many years alone and surrendered only under Arnold pressure. The beginning of Stallone's life path was classic. The early years in New York were tough for Sylvester. While the profession of actor did not bring income, to find money to pay for rent and somehow make ends meet, he was forced to do the most unusual work. He cleaned lion cages and cut fish heads. His acting career also stalled and Sly even agreed to star in porn. And it was not a beautiful tale, which was supposed to dramatize actors' biography, but the hard truth. But in the Stallone biography has a place and for fairy tales. Many believe that before Rocky, Sylvester was a nobody and got into the movie by chance. That's naturally not true. Studio wouldn't dare to make even low-budget film with no one known actor in the lead role. Even before Rocky, he appeared in several films, and in The Lords of Flatbush he had one of the main roles. Because of his little acting experience that one of the producers decided to read his script. Although it was the will of the occasion. The actor himself says that he auditioned for another movie, but he was turned down for the role. When he left the room, he told producers that he had an incredible script. After one of them read it, Sylvester was immediately offered $350,000 for it. In those years, it was a lot of money. The actor himself says he had only $100 in his pocket, and he tried to sell someone his dog, because he could no longer feed it. He thought for a long time over the proposal and eventually refused to sell the rights to the script, setting a condition for the main role in the film. In writing the script, Stallone was inspired by the fight between Muhammad Ali and Chuck Wepner. His first script Sly wrote in just 3 days. Of course, it was rewritten and finalized by experts later. The original text was much darker than final version. It had a lot of focus on racism in sports and Rocky even walked out of the final fight, saying he didn't want to be part of such a world. Stallone was later offered another $150,000 to give the role to Ryan O'Neal, but Sly was strong in his belief that if he missed his chance with Rocky, he would never be a big star. For the lead role, Stallone had to sell the script for $1, and his acting fee was minimal. Money for the shooting decided to allocate Studio United Artists. Here's another funny tale. No one at the studio knew who is Sylvester Stallone, and someone showed them a group photo from Lords of Flatbush, and they were immediately fired up with the idea of making a movie. They just didn't understand why the man named Sylvester Stallone was a blonde guy with blue eyes. Later it turned out that they mistook Stallone with his partner in the film Perry King. When the producers showed the real Stallone, they were ready to immediately abandon the project, but the shooting had already begun and to cancel the film was too late. Because the main role was played by an unknown actor, the film's budget was cut from $2 to $1 million. As a result, the film exceeded the budget and the missing $100,000 film producers added from their personal money. On the set of the film, producers economized on everything. Even for the roles in the crowds, everyone invited their friends and family members. That's how Sylvester's father and brother played in the movie. Most of the scenes of running through Philadelphia were filmed in a partisan style. The producers of the film did not obtain any permits to shoot and did not hire a mass production team. The sprinting episode on the pier was filmed entirely by accident. Stallone and director John Avildsen were driving by and the director liked the landscape. Stallone just got out of the car and ran. The film hit theaters in November 1976. No one waited for it, and Rocky didn't become an instant hit. But the film showed excellent resilience at the box office, and in early '77 Rocky captured first place in the American chart. In total, Sly spent 2 years at the box office. During this time the little movie managed to collect $117 million in the United States and $107 million in the rest of the world. These numbers allowed Rocky to become the highest-grossing film of the year. These days, adjusted for inflation, that would be over $1 billion on a budget of $5 million. Sly immediately became one of the most in-demand actors, and for his next film he asked for $1 million. Fist did poorly at the box office, and Paradise Alley, which followed, flopped altogether. But Sly says that with this film, he wanted to get into the director's chair of the Rocky sequel, and the film fulfilled its purpose. Rocky II has $7 million budget and took in $200 million at the worldwide box office. Stallone cemented his big star status, but there was one problem. All of the actor's other films either failed or brought a small income. This prevented the actor from becoming a star with the prefix super. But it is not the most enjoyable nature of Stallone has already shown. On the set of the movie Victory, producers say that Sylvester wanted his character to score a decisive goal, because he is the main star of the film. The screenwriters hardly managed to convince him that the goalkeeper was unlikely to be able to score a goal against the opponent. In the end, Stallone agreed to an option in which his character takes the difficult ball during a penalty kick. At this point the actor did not stop. On the set of Nighthawks, Sly fired director Harry Nelson, who, in his opinion, was not up to the high standard of the film. While the studio was looking for a replacement, Stallone himself sat in the director's chair and began directing the filming. This caused a big scandal with the Directors Guild, whose rules prohibit such tricks. Universal Studios barely resolved the scandal, and Stallone was forced to give way to Bruce Malmuth. Sly is not satisfied with this state of affairs categorically, and he began to bypass all these strange rules by hiring pocket directors, who will silently observe the work of the real master. In 1982, Stallone's star disease developed even more strongly. 2 big box office hits came out at once. One was the third Rocky, which collected over $250 million worldwide, and the second hit was First Blood. First Blood was originally a troubled project. No one wanted to star in it, including Stallone. The producers even had to raise the fee for the title role, and $3.5 million did convince Sly. First version of the picture Stallone so disliked, that the actor even wanted to buy back the footage and destroy it. Subsequently, he agreed with the producers that his face in the film appeared as rarely as possible. It reduced the timing of the film by 2 times. In the United States, the film went quietly. On a budget of $15 million, John Rambo took $47 million. But at the worldwide box office, First Blood was a big hit and total grosses went over the $125 million. The fact that Sly was able to prove that someone else needed him outside of the boxing franchise made him a superstar. But then came the most painful failure of the actor's career, movie Rhinestone. From this film Stallone became a permanent hero at the Golden Raspberry Awards. By the confession of Sylvester, Rhinestone is among those films, from the participation in which he certainly would have refused, if he had a second chance. This film dealt a double blow to the actor's career. For the sake of filming, he refused to participate in Beverly Hills Cop and Romancing the Stone, a role in which he personally persuaded by Michael Douglas, who was the producer of the film, but he himself was not supposed to play in it. So Sly ruined his career, but saved Eddie Murphy and Michael Douglas. It's not hard to imagine what might have happened to these films had Sly decided to star in them. The actor really says that Rhinestone was supposed to be very different. But at the last minute, director Mike Nichols left. Plus, because of the new director, they changed the music in the movie and Rhinestone became a silly comedy, although it shouldn't have been. Screenwriter Phil Alden Robinson has a very different opinion. He claims that it was Stallone who completely destroyed his script with his edits. Both ended up getting nominated for a Golden Raspberry, and Sly also got his first Raspberry as the worst actor. All this critical love would play out in the future, and Sly entered in 1985 as a major Hollywood superstar. He received $12 million for Rocky IV. At the time, the largest single royalty in Hollywood history. And next to it came the sequel to Rambo, which was the first film to get more than 2,000 screens in the United States. This had a positive effect on the box office. At the end of the year, the film took the $300 million. But critics destroyed both movies. Stallone won a Golden Raspberry as the director of Rocky IV and as the worst actor in Rambo 2. He would have also won a Raspberry for the screenplay, but there he successfully screwed James Cameron, from whose script there is nothing in the final film. In the 86th year on the big screens was released movie Cobra. For his participation in it, Sly again renewed the record for royalties, which amounted to $13 million. Although the film was based on a novel by Paula Gosling, the script was a compilation of Sly's ideas for the movie Beverly Hills Cop. On the set of Cobra, Stallone took full advantage of it. He managed absolutely everything. He personally selected all the actors, appointed the director, approved the budget. Also, Sly dragged his wife Bridget Nielsen in the movie. Cameraman Rick Waite called Sylvester Stallone the real director of the film, while George Cosmatos was more engaged in the production functions. The original version of Cobra ran for over 2 hours. The movie turned out to be too violent. Worried about future ratings and the viewers who would have to watch it for more than 2 hours, the producers convinced Stallone to cut the film by almost 30 minutes. Because of the rating committee, another 10 minutes had to be removed from the movie. Many civilian deaths during shootings were cut from the film. As a result, the theatrical version of Cobra was only 87 minutes long. At the American box office, the film was a disappointment. The other Sly films coming out side by side collected huge amounts of money at the box office. And Cobra was expected to do much better. Most likely the information buzz around Stallone that was blown up by critics who never miss an opportunity to say that Stallone is the worst actor in the history of cinema, worked here. They wrote about it in dozens of American newspapers and magazines. There were a lot of TV shows about movies and everybody could find out that Stallone was a bad actor, even if they didn't want to. But in the rest of the world the truth no one told. And if the state's Cobra received 6 nominations for the Golden Raspberry and brought in only $49 million, at the worldwide box office, Sly has collected over $100 million. Next, Stallone was hit by the failure of Over the Top. The actor never tires of saying that it was one of the 3 best films of his career. And if he was a director, the movie would have been completely different and everyone would have liked it too. And so, he was just a simple actor with a record fee of $13.5 million. In the end, another Golden Raspberry was thrown at Sylvester and David Mendenhall, who played his son too at once, that ruining boy career. As promotional support for the film, the studio specially organized an arm wrestling tournament, the same one that was in the film. The championship began in Beverly Hills in August 1985, and continued throughout North America, Europe, Israel and Japan. The finale took place on July 26, 1986, at the Hilton Hotel in Las Vegas. The film shows real wrestlers and footage shot during the finale, with the exception of scenes with Sylvester Stallone. Despite the promotional support and Stallone on the poster, the film failed at the box office. The late 80s and early 90s were a time of great turbulence for Sly. Even the third Rambo suffered, which again became the most expensive movie in history, and Stallone renewed another record for royalties. This period of the actor's career is interesting in that on several occasions, he received as royalties the biggest part of the budget of the film in which he starred. A similar thing happened on Lock Up. Of the $24 million budgets, Sly took $15 million. For Sylvester himself, it was an accidental movie. Director John Flynn says that when he got the job, it turned out there was no script for the movie yet, but there was Stallone, ready to shoot and he only had a small window. So, he had to select locations for filming and planning a future movie on the fly. The script was written by several people at once, and shooting started as soon as the first pages appeared. Often, Flynn and Stallone had to shoot without a script at all. Sometimes they would spend the whole day talking to the prisoners and inventing different scenes for the future. The director, by the way, calls Sylvester a true professional with whom he had no problems. By the way, it is believed that it was with this film started the Tom Sizemore career. Sylvester Stallone invited him personally and the actors are still good friends till this day. But the film completely failed at the box office and Sly received his next Golden Raspberry nomination and the curse of the critics. Interestingly, instead of Lock Up, Stallone could have starred in Die Hard. The film was originally turned down by Arnold and Sly didn't want to pick up the role after The Rising Star. I wonder how the movie would have turned out and how Bruce Willis' career might have gone further if Sly agreed. Next at the box office was another expensive action film with Stallone, Tango and Cash. On the set of this film, Sylvester became the big boss again and fired the cameraman. Subsequently, Sly began to push Kurt Russell's character into the background. Because of this, a fight erupted between the actors and the filming of the movie suddenly became even more problematic. There is another thing with the firing of director Andrei Konchalovsky. The director himself says that he and Stallone had a great relationship and he was fired by producer Peter Guber. But it's hard to imagine that anyone could have made such decisions without Stallone's own approval. Because of its enormous, at the time, budget of $55 million at the box office, Tango and Cash was unsuccessful. Although it grossed over $100 million at the worldwide box office. Perhaps it could have raised more. The film did not start well at the box office. It kept pretty good, not falling below fourth place for 7 weeks. But their Warner Brothers brought in a comatose Steven Seagal in his best form. Steven came out of coma and quickly dropped Tango and Cash from the charts. The 90s began with the fiasco of the fifth Rocky. Relative to the previous films in the series, it was a real disaster. The fifth film cost $40 million. And with great difficulty managed to collect $100 million. On top of that, 7 Golden Raspberry nominations flew at Stallone. The follow-up failed Oscar. It was a Hollywood longshot that was supposed to be made back in the early 80s with John Belushi in the title role. But the actor died and the project hung in the air. That's why it has a very impressive budget for a film of this kind. The total cost included all the money that was spent on the scripts and preparations for filming for 10 years. Stallone got $15 million again for the film, which bumped the budget to $35 million, and the Oscar could only take 23 at the theaters. In those years, Stallone was at the height of fame and such box office figures for a film with him in the lead role shocked many people. Just at this time, Sylvester had to shift on Hollywood Olympus. At the top, where he was for several years in complete loneliness, climbed Arnold Schwarzenegger. Because of this moment and happened Comedy Stop or My Mom Will Shoot. During those years, Arnold was doing great at the box office with family movies like Twins and Kindergarten Cop. And rumors reached Stallone that Arnold was interested in a movie about a granny with a gun. Sly says that he pulled all his connections to get that movie for himself. And when the movie was already being made, he found out that Arnold was intentionally spreading rumors about his desire to star in the movie. At the time the film was released, many famous American critics called it the worst film in the history of cinema. The film was a complete failure, and Sly won a Golden Raspberry. What's funny, because of his desire to star in this movie, Stallone cut his salary in half. Such a sequence of failures could have failed even a star of this level. But in the 93rd were released 2 big hits. Cliffhanger and Demolition Man hit the big screens almost at the same time. Sylvester Stallone says that he did not really like the script of the movie about the climbers. But he was always afraid of heights and decided that the movie can help him conquer this fear. In addition, his desire to star in the film was strengthened by $15 million. It is often written that this movie is also generally Sly-made, and Rennie Harlin did not interfere with what was happening. On a budget of $70 million, the film made $255 million. There were plans for a sequel to Cliffhanger, which involved the villains taking over the Hoover Dam. Stallone's character was supposed to fight powerful water streams and at the same time throw all the running bullies in it. Studio wanted to release a sequel in 1996, but because of the low figures, specifically in the United States box office, where the film grossed only $70 million, work on the sequel went very slowly and eventually the project was shelved. In the late 90s, Stallone tried to revive the sequel, but because of the huge budget, which was needed, any serious progress on the project has not yet. With Demolition Man, similar situation. Stallone put Marco Brambilla in the director's chair. The director, similarly to Harlan, was responsible for the overall atmosphere and tried not to get in the way of the real talent. After a few days of shooting, Stallone kicked actress Lori Petty out of the film. The actress was considered a rising star after Point Break and Free Willy. She didn't want to agree with Sly's vision of her character, so he immediately kicked her out the door and agreeable Sandra Bullock appeared in the film. Demolition Man took $159 million at the box office on a budget of $57, which again was not bad, but not enough for a sequel. In 1994, Stallone had another clash with Steven Seagal. Initially, Steven was offered the lead role and offered to direct The Specialist. However, when he demanded $9 million for the job, the studio invited Sylvester Stallone instead. Sly was very interested in the project and he even went to reduce his fee to $12 million. Since Stallone was a bigger star than Seagal, Steven was quickly kicked out and studio gave movie to Stallone. The script for the film was considered very promising and Sly saw David Fincher as the director. But the studio rejected Fincher because at the time he only had the problematic Alien 3 under his belt. James Woods fell under Sly Coronet's strike in this film. At test screenings, the only thing everyone liked in the film was Woods' character. After that, Stallone demanded that some of the scenes with him be deleted in order to have more screen time for himself. Despite Sylvester's best efforts, The Specialist performed well at the box office. On a budget of $45 million, the film took $170. By tradition, Stallone received his next nominations for the Golden Raspberry and even won, along with Sharon Stone in the category of the worst screen couple. But this is where Sly's streak of good luck finally ended. In '95, he was struck by two major failures. At the beginning of the year, Failed Assassins, and at the end of the year with a high-budget Judge Dredd, in which the actor once again pushed the director. Danny Cannon later swore he would never work with the star in his life again. The failure of Dredd was so bad, because of Steven Seagal, who was packed into a corset and taken by train to cinemas. The Under Siege sequel was released and Sly had no chance of attracting an adult audience to his film. His only movie in 1996, Sly stole from Nicolas Cage. There was no Rock back then, and the talented nephew was not a particularly important actor. Sly himself agreed to star in The Daylight because he wanted to overcome his fear of closed spaces, and also wanted to get $17.5 million for the role. Stallone's struggle with his phobias ended miserably. The film, with a budget of $80 million, took only $33 million in the United States. The worldwide box office brought another $120 million. But all this barely allowed to recoup the budget. After that, Sylvester decided that something needed to change and signed on for the movie Cop Land. The actor says that he wanted to get into this movie because of crisis of his career. In movie starred Robert De Niro and Harvey Keitel, and the film was supposed to be shown at the Cannes Film Festival. Because of this, Stallone turned down his usual fee. For the role he received only $60,000. In the end, it turned out that the film has even more damaged his career because after he lost several favorable contracts. Cop Land completely ignored by the various awards that the producers had hoped for. It didn't make it to the Cannes Film Festival because of the prolonged reshoots. In general, Cop Land marked the end of Stallone as a superstar. For the next three films, the actor still received a huge fee, but all these works failed miserably. And the 55 millionth Detox was not even released in the USA box office. The film was released immediately on video almost everywhere. Sly was particularly disappointed with the driven. According to him, he signed up for this movie when he was still very different. It was a drama about Formula One. But rights issues forced the studio to rewrite the script. According to the actor himself, the film ended up being something incomprehensible. Stallone remained in the film only because of the fee of $20 million. Movie director Renny Harlin believes that Stallone, who wrote and then rewrote the script, guilty for the fact that the movie turned out as it did. The film, traditionally, received almost all of Golden Raspberry nominations. After such failures, Sly decided to restart his career. In 5 years, he only appeared in a couple of projects in the background and played one of the main roles in the third Spy Kids. The actor returned at the very end of 2006 with the movie Rocky Balboa. The film cost only $24 million and collected $155 million. The return was successful also in the way that the actor was praised by critics. After such success, Stallone decided to bring back another of his heroes. Rambo 4 performed worse than Rocky, but again have good ratings from audiences and not the worst reviews from critics. All of this prompted Sly to work on The Expendables. The film was Stallone's brainchild from start to finish. He came up with the idea, wrote the script, produced the film, starred in and directed it. For all his efforts, Sly again received a nomination for a Golden Raspberry. The Expendables suffered greatly in the post-production phase. The film was planned to be released in theaters with an adult rating, but after test screenings, the producers insisted that Stallone remove all swearing and the most controversial episodes from the film. Surprisingly, in the entire career of Sylvester Stallone, The Expendables became the first film since Rocky IV, which broke the bar of $100 million at the American box office. The sequels about action retirees will no longer be able to repeat the achievement of the first film. Now the actor is 76, and he continues to shoot and occasionally talk about plans for the future. Now Sly no longer has the star status, which he once had, but the actor managed to get $10 and $15 million for roles in films. This income can only be envied. The actor has several films in the planning, including the fourth part of The Expendables. Samaritan is coming out soon. And we can wish him luck, despite the fact that he is probably the most disliked actor by critics and even received the title of the worst actor in the history of Hollywood. Despite all the Golden Raspberries, he was able to impress audiences, become a superstar and climb to the top of Hollywood Olympus. Thanks for listening. Subscribe and stay tuned.